635 times. One president said no, and Congress could do almost nothing to stop him. The power to kill a law with a single stroke did not come from a campaign promise. It was written into the founding document. Article 1, Section 7. When a bill passes both chambers, it lands on the president's desk. 10 days. Sign it, and it becomes law. Return it with objections, and it does not, unless 2/3 of both the House and the Senate vote to override. That threshold was meant to be high. In practice, it would turn the Oval Office into a choke point, and one man would use it more than every other president combined in the century before him. But before that man, there was a quieter beginning, and a president who believed the power was not his to use lightly. The framers had given the executive a break, not to make law, to stop it. What they could not know was how often that break would be used or how hard one president would press it. The clause was brief. The consequences would stretch across every presidency that followed, and the first test would come sooner than anyone expected. The first time it happened was April 5, 1792. George Washington had been in office 3 years. Congress sent him a bill to reapportion representatives among the states. The math, his advisors argued, was wrong. It gave some states more seats than the Constitution's formula allowed. 1 representative per 30,000. The bill broke that rule for 8 states. Washington consulted his cabinet. Thomas Jefferson pushed for a veto. Washington agreed. He sent the bill back. Congress did not override. They rewrote the bill instead, setting the ratio at 1 representative per 33,000. Washington would use the veto only one more time in 8 years. In February 1797, when he rejected an act that would have cut cavalry units from the army, he had set the precedent. He had also shown how sparingly the first presidents intended to use it. For decades that followed, the veto remained rare. John Adams used none. Thomas Jefferson used none. The power was there. It was not yet the weapon it would become. That restraint would not hold. Something was coming that would change how often the pen was used, and by whom. And when it did, the numbers would climb in a way no one had seen before. The next president to break that pattern would not be a radical. He would be a man who had built his career saying no, and he would say it hundreds of times from the Oval Office. That change did not come from a wartime leader or a founding figure. It came from a former sheriff and governor who believed the federal government had no business handing out favors. Grover Cleveland. In his first term alone, from 1885 to 1889, he vetoed more than 400 bills. Most were private pension claims from Civil War veterans whose appeals had already been rejected by the Pensions Bureau. Cleveland saw fraud and waste. He said no again and again. When drought devastated Texas, Congress passed a bill to send $10,000 in seed grain to farmers. Cleveland vetoed it. He believed federal aid would weaken the character of the people who received it. In his second term, he added 170 more vetoes. By 1897, he had vetoed 584 bills in total. No president had ever come close. His record would stand for decades. Critics called him stubborn. Supporters called him principled. The veto had become a statement, not just about individual bills, about the role of the federal government itself. Until the country elected a man who would face economic collapse, world war, and a Congress that kept sending him bills he did not want. What happened next would rewrite the record books for good, and the man in the White House would use the same power in a way that would dwarf every predecessor. Cleveland's 584 would finally be surpassed, but not for another 40 years. Not until a crisis that would force Congress to send bill after bill to the desk of a president who was not afraid to refuse them. Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office in 1933. The nation was in crisis. Banks were failing. Millions were out of work. Roosevelt pushed through historic legislation, but he also said no, often. He used the regular veto, returning bills with a message giving Congress a chance to override. And he used the pocket veto. When Congress adjourned before his 10 days were up, he could kill a bill by simply not signing it. No signature, no law, no return message, and no chance for Congress to override because they were not in session to vote. The bill died in his pocket. Unlike a regular veto, a pocket veto could not be overridden. Congress was gone. There was no vote to hold. The tactic was powerful, and Roosevelt used it 263 times. Historians note that he applied the veto to a wider range of subjects than any president before him: spending, tax policy, war measures. By 1943, Congress had had enough. They passed the Revenue Act. Roosevelt vetoed it. This time, they mustered the votes. 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate. The override succeeded. It was one of 9 overrides he would face. A reminder that even the most active veto pen had limits. By 1945, he had vetoed 635 bills. 372 regular, 263 pocket. 9 of those vetoes were overridden. 626 stood. No president before or since has come close to that number. The scale of that power is one story. The moments when Congress fought back are another, and those moments would prove that the veto was not the last word. The Constitution had given Congress a reply. 2/3 of each chamber could override. The bar was high, but when the stakes were high enough, Congress sometimes cleared it. The first major wave of overrides came in the wake of the Civil War. Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's successor, vetoed the Reconstruction Acts. He wanted a lenient path for the former Confederate states. Congress did not. They overrode him again and again. Military districts, rights for freedmen. The veto was not enough to stop them. Across American history, of more than 1,400 regular vetoes, only about 1 in 14 has been overridden. 2/3 in both chambers is rare. But when it happens, the president loses. Gerald Ford, in less than 3 years in office, had 12 of his vetoes overridden. No modern president had a higher rate for his time in office. Harry Truman vetoed 250 bills. Congress overrode 12. Ronald Reagan faced 9 overrides. The pen could block. It could not always win. And sometimes, the pen was never used at all. 7 presidents in history have never issued a single veto. Some died early in office. William Henry Harrison, James Garfield, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, John Quincy Adams completed a full term without one. So did George W. Bush through his entire first term, from 2001 to 2005. One party controlled the White House, and both chambers' bills that reached his desk had already been shaped to avoid a fight. The veto stayed in the drawer. For years, it stayed unused. In the decades that followed, Bill Clinton would veto 37 bills. George W. Bush 12 in total over 2 terms. Barack Obama 12. Congress overrode one of Obama's vetoes, 2 of Clinton's, 4 of Bush's. The pattern was clear. Crisis and conflict produce more vetoes. Unity between the branches produces fewer. Divided government sends more bills to the desk, and more of those bills meet a no. The veto is a tool. It does not guarantee victory. It only guarantees a pause, a moment when the president can block. And then the rest is politics, votes, alliances. The same forces that pass a bill can sometimes muster the supermajority to pass it again. History had shown that, from Johnson to Ford to Reagan, the pen was powerful. It was not absolute. When a president signs a bill, the story ends there. When he vetoes it, the story has only begun. Will Congress let it die, or will they muster the supermajority and write the ending themselves? That tension has played out in every administration. From the first veto in 1792 to the latest count in the Senate ledger, the numbers tell you who said no. The overrides tell you when Congress said yes anyway. If you enjoyed this deep dive into American presidential power, like the video and subscribe for more weekly history breakdowns. Cleveland's 584 reflected a man at odds with a Congress full of pension seekers. Roosevelt's 635 reflected 12 years of depression, war, and constant legislative battles. Truman's 250. Dwight Eisenhower's 181-73 regular and 108 pocket, with only 2 overridden. The record holders all governed in eras when Congress sent bill after bill to the desk, and the president said no. The Constitution had given one person a gate, open it or close it. For more than 2 centuries, that gate has been used in every way imaginable, sparingly, relentlessly, or not at all. Some presidents left the gate open. Some closed it so often that Congress learned to work around them. The tally is in the archives. The Senate keeps the count. Every veto, every override, from 1789 to the present. The numbers do not lie. They only wait to be read. The record would not be broken. It would stand as a reminder of what one presidency, in one era, did with the power the Constitution had granted. 635. No one has come close since. And the gap between first and second place remains enormous. Cleveland's 584. Then Truman's 250. Then Eisenhower's 181. The drop is steep. The outlier is clear. One president, 12 years. A power used in a way the framers could not have imagined. Or perhaps they could. They had written the clause. They had set the threshold. They had left the rest to the men who would sit in the chair. Some would use the power with caution. Some would use it as a blunt instrument. And one would use it 635 times, leaving a record that still stands. No labels, no chapters, just the tally. And the story behind every number. That is the story. It stands. The presidential veto was designed as a vital check, yet Franklin D. Roosevelt used it 635 times, defying the intended balance. While a 2/3 override exists, FDR's record proves how one leader can reshape history. The story is in these numbers.